So the other day I made a video talking about exactly what I would want from a SteamOS based living room console. Now whether Valve creates these directly or whether they have third parties like Asus make them, I'm not sure, but assuming that they do come out with a Steam console, what are the games that I would actually want to play on it? And that's what today's video is all about. Not necessarily just specific games that I'd like to play, but rather types of games that I think make the most sense to explore in a living room capacity. Because as much as I love the Steam Deck and playing in portable mode when I'm watching a movie or something like that, there are also certain games where I just really want to be completely locked in and play on the biggest display in my house, which would be in my living room. So let's go ahead and kick this off with the first type of game that I would be very excited to explore on a SteamOS based console in my living room, and that would just be big, beefy, gigantic games. I'm talking about games in the vein of something like Red Dead Redemption 2, or super long RPGs like Persona 5 Royal, or more recently Metaphor ReFantasia, which I've been loving by the way. And don't get me wrong, I think it's totally magical to be able to play giant open world games on the Steam Deck. It's pretty cool to go ahead and jump in, make a little bit of progress, and then jump back out, but when I really want to lock in again and just really be completely immersed in the game, and I'm not worried about being pulled up to the desk back here to like capture footage for videos like this, and I just want to relax and have a good time, these are some of the games that I would love to explore in the comfort of my living room. Mostly because these games tend to require a significant time investment to really get the most out of them, and it's also kind of a nice bonus feature that thanks to cloud saves, if I do opt to chip away at these games here and there where I can on the Steam Deck, then I should be able to just seamlessly jump back in and really take it all in when I have some true downtime to fully appreciate them. Next up, another category of games that I would love to explore on a SteamOS based living room console would be old console games. Now I don't mean emulation, and I'm actually not really at all excited about doing emulation on a device like this, at least not beyond just some light testing, because ultimately while I appreciate the emulation that I can get from my Steam Deck, when it comes time for me to just sit down in my living room, relax and unwind, I don't want to have to fight with any emulator nonsense when I'm about to do it. Whether that means making sure that it will actually launch, since sometimes the Steam Deck does fail to launch my emulators correctly, or just trying to remember what system uses what combination of buttons to do things like save state, load state, and so on. Rather, what I'm talking about when I say old console games are games that I may have missed the first time around on console, but now exist as ports on PC. And not just because it's inherently nice to see some of these games in PC ports on a big screen like what I would have in a living room TV scenario, but also because if I wanted to get to them through a console, like say I wanted to drag out the PS3 or something like that, that would require a little bit of extra effort on my part, or I would have to keep tons of consoles at the ready to dive into games like that. And I know it's not a huge lift necessarily to just hook up an old console or anything, but sometimes I do want to make sure that I'm limiting the wear and tear on those legacy consoles, which it is super weird for me to say that the PS3 is a legacy console, but I still have the original big boy PS3, which actually has the PS2 hardware inside it, I believe, and even though I love that system, I also recognize that it's kind of a ticking time bomb and will eventually get the yellow light of death, so if I can limit putting wear and tear on that system, I would prefer to, and if there are games that were pretty specific to the PS3 that I can play through PC ports now, like something in the vein of, I don't know, Lollipop Chainsaw, I would prefer to play it that way, and in turn keep my precious old school PS3 as healthy as I can for as long as I can. And to that end, most of the games that I would probably visit that fit this category would probably be from that 4th or 5th gen era from like the PS2, PS3, Xbox 360, GameCube, and so on, because it would be really fun to revisit again games like Lollipop Chainsaw or No More Heroes without having to drag out the PS3 or a Wii for the privilege. And also, like I mentioned before, there were plenty of games that came out back in the day that I know were great games, but I never got the chance to experience them, and that would include games like Beyond Good and Evil, or the remastered Spyro trilogy, which is a game that I was familiar with back in the day, but never had myself on the PlayStation 1. And while I guess it would still be fun to experience these games on my Steam Deck or pulled up to my desk with the gaming rig, again, I think based on their console roots, it would be best suited to playing in a living room type scenario. This next one is kind of a stark contrast because the next grouping of games or type of game that I would like to play on a Steam living room console would definitely be the games that I couldn't get to work on the Steam Deck. Because ultimately, even though it would still be running SteamOS in this scenario, it would presumably be more powerful and have a different architecture, which might allow for some of the games that I couldn't get to run on the Steam Deck to actually work on this console. And honestly, I'd say about 90 to 95% of the games I ever try to fire up on the Steam Deck either work just fine or work just fine after some slight adjustments. Like, recently I had issues getting Banisher's Ghosts of New Eden to fire up, but after fixing like a small phantom dialogue problem that prevented the game from launching, I was able to play it with no issue. But that other 5 to 10% either represent games that are just completely unsupported on the Steam Deck, or maybe you can get them to run, but then they break intermittently because of some game-breaking scenario. So while I wouldn't be willing to do a ton of tinkering in this living room scenario where I just want to sit down and play, I would at least be willing to test out some of the games that didn't work previously to see if I had greater success on new hardware. And off the top of my head, this would include games like No More Heroes, Obscure, Deadly Premonition, and I'm sure there's at least a half a dozen more that I've tried but didn't work, but yeah, I just can't remember them right now. And this next category of games is really an offshoot of the one that I just mentioned, and that would be games that I just can't really get to run that well on the Steam Deck. As a lot of you know, whenever you see a verified status for a Steam Deck game, it doesn't really tell the whole story. Because verified might mean that it runs great at 30 FPS, but a lot of people may demand 60 FPS, so that really doesn't do a whole lot for them. And as somebody who tests tons and tons of games on the channel all year long, I run into a lot of games that I really enjoy and show a lot of promise, but sadly they're a little bit hamstrung by the comparatively meager Steam Deck hardware. And these games don't have to be gigantic taxing affairs necessarily to produce this kind of behavior. Even fairly shorter experiences that don't require significant time investment can still be pretty graphically taxing on the Steam Deck and in turn don't offer the best way to experience those games. For instance, one game that I love to revisit periodically that has been rotting on my backlog for years at this point is Detroit Become Human. However, I don't love playing it on the Steam Deck because it's really only a good experience there if you can stomach, fluctuations of about 20 to 50 FPS and pretty muddy visuals. And while graphics-heavy narrative walking simulators tend to be some of the biggest offenders, I suppose technically you can encounter this behavior across any number of games. And given the fact that these games often feel like watching a movie, they're a great fit for the living room anyways. So yeah, it would be great if I could play some of these games that essentially play like movies where I watch movies but only own on Steam without having to fall back to buying a copy on PS5 or Series X. And off the top of my head, some games that didn't perform that great on the Steam Deck that I would love to check out on the Steam console would be things like A Plague Tale, Lake, Pacific Drive, Marvel Midnight Suns, and The Quarry. These are all games that I enjoy when I check them out, but again, just didn't play great on the deck, so yeah, I would love to have a second chance to play them without being pulled up on my desk to do so, and to just relax in my living room the same way I would with a PS5 or an Xbox. And the last category of games that I would want to play most on a Steam console is perhaps the most obvious, and that would be PC exclusives that I can't even get on another console. And I don't think I can really even think of a ton of games that really meet this criteria for me. It seems like even a lot of indie games today will simultaneously launch on not only the PC, but also Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation, but there are a few exceptions to this, I guess. Like Children of the Sun is a game that I really enjoy playing on the Steam Deck, but would love to see it on the giant display in my living room. And then also I could think of Mouthwashing, which is a game I played the demo for, and as a horror experience, I would love to just get completely immersed in that game, again, from the comfort of my couch. So yeah, that's it for this one. It's just one of those things I started thinking about, ironically not until after I got done thinking about what I would actually want from a Steam console, but yeah, I think it did make sense to explore some of the use cases and whether I could even justify owning one if there weren't any games that would really be best suited to that particular style of play. But hey, what about you? Assuming there is a SteamOS based console that's looming on the horizon for us, would you want to actually get one for yourself? And if so, are there any game experiences that you can think of that would be best suited to that device? If so, please let me know in the comments below because I would love to hear your feedback on it. Now, as far as what's coming up on the channel, I'm still working on some retro stuff, so stay tuned for that. And then also soon enough, we'll be taking a look at the games coming down the pike in March. So yeah, good stuff coming up the next couple of weeks. But as always, thanks for taking the time to watch videos here. It means a lot to me. Take care, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.